Hello everyone and welcome back to another Babbling Irons video, and today myself and Mike are going to be discussing another rumour that involves Harvey Barnes but also involves a potential departing player in Benrahma. So Mike, before we actually get into this, the support on the video we just released is absolutely crazy, so go check that out if you haven't already, around Edson Alvarez. Absolutely mental, our best video so far, so thank you very much, and also subscribe if you haven't already. But yeah, the latest news coming out, Mike, is around Benrahma, around the Harvey Barnes saga. So this was released today from West Ham Central in regards to a Guardian Sports article saying that Benrahma could be sold to facilitate the move for Harvey Barnes. Now, we needed to dig a little bit deeper into that because that as alone is very clickbaity. So we looked at the actual article and this was what was said. So it says at least one of Benrahma, Fornals and Maxwell Cornet could leave if Barnes does move to the London Stadium. So effectively, we've got a policy where we want to bring in Barnes, but it's going to be at the expense for someone else. First of all, is that necessarily the best thing we could be doing? With the likes of Lanzini leaving, and we've got Fornals playing out on the left. Could he then potentially move into the middle? How would you like to see that restructured if Harvey Barnes was to come in?
Yeah, so for me, I think it would be a bad idea to get rid of any one of those three, really. I think it's very difficult and very harsh on Cornet, unless he's had a major fallout with, Moyes, that it's come to that point. There's a breakdown in relationship, so it's a necessary thing. Fornals, I think we saw in that tail end of the season that he still has a major part to play. He still loves the club. And as you say, Lanzini's going, so we finally have a vacant spot where he can move into being more central, which we've all been praying for an untold time. And he's not a left winger. So we're not going to have, if we sign Harvey Barnes, we're not going to have four left wingers because Cornet can play left side, whether that be wing back, whether it be winger, whether that be, and he can also play on the right hand side, he can also play up front. So you have a player who's incredibly flexible. So why not use him to give competition, genuine competition and rotation to Bowen? Because again, 4 competitions we're going to be, we need to have players that we can rotate. And it's unlikely that, say, young Gideon Kadua is going to get a chance at right wing. So we might as well move Cornet to the right-hand side. Fornals obviously move inside, and then that leaves Benrahma with no competition. So Harvey Barnes is brilliant for that. And we've said before with Harvey Barnes, it could be absolutely brilliant for us. It could be also an absolute pain for us because he plays very similar to Bowen. Now, he can bring goals, he can bring assists, but if you look at last season, 12 goals, fantastic. 1 assist, not so great. And his overall involvement in play is very limited. And we've seen down the right-hand side, unless you've got a very attacking fullback like we have with Soufal, you can become very, very narrow very quickly and easy to defend against. We don't necessarily have, besides Paqueta, we don't really necessarily have the creative midfielders to maintain possession and then also then break teams down for the likes of those inside forwards like a Barnes and Bowen to kind of capitalise. And also, Barnes would be great if you then, because Barnes could actually unleash Scamacca, really.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden Scamacca can start to drop into the hole and help midfield, but also then he's got 2 players coming in off the wing. So that kind of, I guess, that narrowness we're going to have from a front three is actually could be beneficial to someone like Scamacca, because all of a sudden he's going to have 2 players going to constantly be buzzing around and looking to get into those really dangerous areas between the fullback and the centre back. So it could actually rejuvenate, say, Scamacca, and that sounds ridiculous to say because I don't think Scamacca's been a flop this season. I don't think he's been actually bad at all, considering his first season. He's done quite well. So you'd like to think sensible thoughts would come into play and that you would want to keep all 3, and then you can actually just essentially jut 2 of them across the pitch.
Well, that would be interesting because, like we've mentioned before, Fornals, everyone wants to see him play centrally, and this could actually be the key to seeing that, because it would save us a lot of money on investing in that central position, because we'd have that replacement already for Lanzini effectively coming in, and then you've got Barnes competing with Benrahma and Cornet playing on the right, where he's played before in his career. At Lyon, he played there very well and got very good statistics there. So looking at the direct comparison, if Barnes was to come in between this man, Benrahma, obviously scored some absolutely crucial goals for us this season. A very direct player, very good at dribbling. And then you've also got someone like Harvey Barnes, who is slightly different player, which we're going to get into very shortly. How do you think that competition would help Benrahma? Because this season he's been maybe criticised a little bit for his inconsistencies, but he's shown exactly what type of player he can be, and what type of match winner he can be, especially with the European finals. So someone like Barnes, who is absolutely a left winger, not like Fornals, he's very direct. He'll be competing for that #1 spot, no doubt, because of what he's done with Leicester so far. How do you think that would impact Benrahma's performances going into next season?
It should only serve as you'd like to think it would serve as motivation to kind of prove that no, I am still and should be the main man to play in there. So you'd like to think that actually it will have a good kind of driving effect or an impact. Arguably, you could potentially say that, well, maybe it actually means that he can move inside to play more of that Lingard type of role.
Yeah.
That and Barnes plays on the left, and then all of a sudden you have, you play that 4-2-3-1 formation. But again, it comes down to what type of team, what type of formation do we want to play next season? I don't think anyone really knows, because we tried to go this possession route. It didn't really work. We maybe didn't give it enough of enough kind of, I guess.
We had to kind of switch it, didn't we? But just because of the situation we were in. And
I don't think that maybe we necessarily have the right tools within our own coaching environment in which to facilitate it.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of part of the problem. So if we're going to stick with this 4-3-3, which is most likely going to be the case, then Benrahma's only position is on that left-hand side, and seeing as a lot of our build-up, whenever you look at how we play, it always comes down that left-hand side. We're going to be asking a lot of Harvey Barnes, and asking Harvey Barnes really to do a lot of what he hasn't done really at Leicester. Bar the season before last, he's been very much more a goal scorer than a provider, whereas the season before he had much more kind of a level playing field. I think it was around 20 goals and assists altogether.
Well, just to touch on that, Mike, just to look at kind of this season, comparing both Benrahma and Barnes, because that actually alludes to exactly what you've just said there with this season. You can see here that Benrahma's more creative side and contributions without the goals is a lot better than Barnes is. And then you look at the kind of non-penalty goals, that's where Barnes has basically excelled above Benrahma. But all of his other stats, progressive runs, successful dribbles, assists, key passes, offensive actions, they're all in favor of Benrahma here. So when we say what type of player is Barnes going to be if he comes in, how would it be kind of competition to Benrahma? They're two completely different players right now, because you've got one that's maybe more of a more clinical goal scorer, has that kind of instinct in front of goal that wants to do exactly what Bowen does, that we've seen for the past couple of seasons. And then you've got Benrahma, who's more of a creator and will contribute more in the build-up to play. So if we were to sign Harvey Barnes, does that scare you if we continue to play, Bowen on that right-hand side? Because then all of a sudden you're putting a lot of emphasis on Paqueta to have that creativity. And I guess whoever comes in, if Rice isn't to stay, then whoever comes in as the 6, and, it's likely to be Souček again. So where does that creativity come from?
Yeah, I think it's one of those situations where it's both concerning and exciting at the same time, because you now know that you have another goal scorer in your midst. So again, having, say, Barnes there, and he does take a lot of shots, but he actually tends to be quite clinical. If you look at it in terms of, you want to look at statistically in XG and all of that stuff, he is pretty consistent with his finishing. If it's the Harvey Barnes of last year and his contributions in the ball in the final third, then he's not really much of a provider. He's not going to provide very much for the team, which again, that's a problem in a team that struggle to break teams down, because if you have a player that essentially needs to be provided for rather than can provide for others and then get the benefits of other situations, then you're in a bit of a bind. Obviously, we're most likely losing Declan Rice, who does have creative elements within his play. Where then at this point in time, if we eliminate Rice, we are looking at just Souček and Paqueta, and you would state that there is not enough creativity in there or reliance in which to maintain possession. And that's not a criticism of Paqueta in that, because his statistics can be quite low because he actually tries to push things, is a little a little bit on the Souček side because he can be a bit frivolous in possession and can struggle under pressure.
Do you think on the flip side, Mike, that signing someone like Harvey Barnes, if we're going to play Barnes and Bowen, that is almost an indication that next summer Moyes is kind of done with the possession experiment and we're going to maybe focus more on that counter-attacking with a bit more pace in behind?
It says to me that, yeah, that we have given up that idea, and it's just we just want to now just try and counter-attack teams. We're going to try and be resolute defensively. We're going to try and bring in another player that is known to be clinical in those chances, with those half chances. So it does say to me that we're going to play more in that counter-attacking style, because the players, ultimately what they do with the ball is less important as to what they can do in moments. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's essentially strikers generally play in moments, or they have opportunities in the area. Like, the ability to make those runs is great. Obviously, you need players to find them, but then it's about how do they handle those moments, and how do they have composure? Do they have the technical ability in which to obviously make the goal? Do they make the right decisions? And that's what I mean by moments. Rather, it's whether they have the mental and the, I guess, physical/technical ability in which to capitalize it in those kind of situations, because you may actually only get these fleeting points in games where you don't necessarily have the dominance to, continue and have lots of opportunities. So it looks like, he's maybe trying to find a player who's more clinical in nature in that final third, as opposed to maybe being a creative element. So it's a concern. And also, if we do lose Benrahma, the other thing that's not necessarily getting talked about is that we lose a bona fide penalty taker. Benrahma has shown this season, whenever he's taken a penalty, he hasn't missed. The likes of Bowen have missed penalties. Declan Rice obviously has. You look across the squad and go, well, who is there that you're then going to look at to take penalties? And I don't think Harvey Barnes, to my knowledge, hasn't been a penalty taker at West Brom, or even when he went back to Leicester. So you look across that team and you go, okay, then you maybe relied on Paqueta, who again had scored every penalty he's taken, but he does have that stutter run up, which scares the hell out of everyone.
Confident with the Benrahma pens.
Yeah, exactly. So you're kind of losing someone that's been really clinical and positive at penalties this season in Benrahma if you move him on. And there's something to be said about losing a penalty taker. I think we've seen that very much being the case this season by not having Mark Noble, and even last season, because Mark Noble wasn't playing. Season before, because Mark Noble wasn't playing, we didn't have that consistent penalty taker who, when they stepped up, you pretty much could go, it's 1-0.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to be said for essentially removing your penalty taker as well from the team. So it's an odd one, and it feels a bit like I'm trying to understand the justification for it, other than the fact that they're gonna the claim that the only claim I can think that they'll use in which to validate is go that we have 4 left wingers.
Yeah.
Yet not realizing, or not, is that as a justification as opposed to, yes, but actually the nuance of that argument is, yes, you have 4 players who can play on that wing, but you also have within that, one of those players can play on the right-hand side. One of those can play centre midfield and as an attacking midfielder, and arguably one of those can play as a left winger and an attacking midfielder. So when you start to then change that narrative a little bit, then you start to find it hard how they're justifying it. And it kind of then comes across as to, we need to sell to buy, because we're looking to balance the books because of the FFP watch list that we're currently sitting on, that there's maybe a fear that we'll maybe need to sell 1 or 2 players as well and bring in players on a bit of a cheap if we can.
Yeah.
And obviously recoup some of the Declan Rice money. It's
an interesting one. I think long, looking at this summer, there's a lot that needs to happen. So if Harvey Barnes was to come in, I'd be really interested to see the type of players we then target around that in terms of the midfield option and also on the right wing, and whether Moyes is going to do actually what we've discussed here, moving forward now centrally, giving Cornet a bit more freedom to show his versatility and play in multiple positions. So,
and it's also interesting that quote also said that one of them could be sold, and he said initially to facilitate Barnes, but it also makes the point around Gorka's. Oh, that's probably a complete and utter mispronunciation of his name.
The Coventry striker, yeah.
Yeah. So it also sounds like, well, actually, we'll lose a player in midfield if it means we can get another forward. And again, that would then state, well, then at least one of our 3 forwards is going. Obviously, a lot of news has been made around Scamacca, but obviously Antonio hasn't necessarily done very well to impress in the backroom staff after his recent comments. Danny Ings has flattered to deceive. So again, there's going to be
one to keep an eye on, isn't it? It's one to keep an eye on, because there's a lot of movement that could happen, and we've said it before. There's a lot of not just outgoings but incomings that are going to have to happen to complete this. Well, not complete, but continue this rebuild that even Moyes has alluded to himself. He wants to build on this. This is just the building blocks for him. Doesn't want to just go out on this European trophy. So it's going to be a very interesting summer, especially with our Europa League football next season. So let us know in the comments, would you like to see Harvey Barnes join West Ham? And out of those 3, that we mentioned, Benrahma, Fornals, Cornet, if one of them had to leave, who would it be and why? Let us know in the comments. Leave a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you are new around here. And Mike, one thing left to say. Come on, your irons.